Once upon a time in a kingdom far, far away, there was a young and rather unlucky sergeant. Now, this would have been so bad if he was always getting sent on the worst assignments in the army. For example, when a major battle was about to take place, the general would always put him in charge of rounding up straggler sheep from the battlefield. Meanwhile, as his career continued like this, he kept hoping for something good to happen to him. One day, his wish was finally granted. He was given an assignment that all soldiers dream of, guarding an important person. But unfortunately, it came with one big catch. You see, the sergeant was ordered to protect a grumpy old countess who lived in a remote village deep in the mountains. And if that wasn't bad enough, the journey to get there took 6 days on horseback. So needless to say, when he arrived, he felt completely miserable. But to make things even worse, the moment the countess saw him, she said, "Oh, dear God, what an unfortunate assignment I got." She then went inside her house and slammed the door in his face, leaving him out in the rain. At this point, he wanted to give up and go home. However, he knew better than to disobey a direct order. And since he had no choice but to stay, he might as well have made the best of it. So he started walking around the village to see how he could be useful. And right away he noticed that everyone seemed very sad. It appeared that a few weeks earlier, many of their goats had gone missing, followed by their cows and sheep. In fact, almost every family had lost several head of livestock during the night. And as if that wasn't enough, their crops also began failing. That's why when the sergeant asked if he could help with anything, they immediately told him about their problems. He then promised to do his best to solve them, although he really had no idea how. Nevertheless, the next morning he went out to investigate what could be happening. And after talking to some people, he heard rumors that a large group of hungry wolves had recently moved into the forest nearby. Because of this, many animals were being lost, not only here, but in several villages nearby. Now, while this certainly explained what was happening, it didn't really offer any solutions. Then suddenly, one of the villagers spoke up and said, "Wait, if we sacrifice one of our cows every night, maybe the wolves will stop attacking us." This idea was quickly dismissed by others, though, because they couldn't just keep losing their animals like this. As they were arguing back and forth, the sergeant finally stepped in and said, "I have an idea." And then he turned to one of the older villagers and asked, "How far away is the nearest big city?" "About 3 days' walk," the man replied. Then the sergeant said, "Well, I'll be heading there tomorrow to check out the stores, but I can bring you whatever you need from there." "Oh, thank you so much," the woman replied. "That would be amazing. I want some wire and nails." He then returned the next evening with the supplies, and everyone gathered around to watch as they built something incredible. It was a tall wooden fence that surrounded the entire village. It was also very strong and high, so even a hungry wolf wouldn't be able to climb it or jump over it. After seeing this, everyone thanked the sergeant, and the villagers even invited him to eat dinner with them. And for the first time, he felt welcome in the village. However, as the days went by, the crops still didn't grow, and they had used up most of their food supplies. To make matters worse, the weather turned cold and snowy, which meant that their chances of growing anything now were very slim. Fortunately, the sergeant knew just what to do. As he had experience building greenhouses from his time in the army, he organized the villagers, and they spent a few days building something similar. They used wood and covered it with plastic to create a safe haven where plants could still grow. He also instructed the villagers to plant seeds inside and water them every day. And just as they finished the last one, the snow began melting, which caused water to pour into the greenhouse and nourish the soil. This meant that they could continue growing vegetables throughout the winter. To everyone's surprise, their first harvest was ready just a few weeks later. Everyone in the village was overjoyed and thanked the sergeant for helping them. But little did they know, the best was yet to come. You see, after the sergeant arrived, almost every argument in the village stopped. That's because whenever two people disagreed, he would step in and remind them that they needed to work together in order to survive. One time two drunk men were about to get into a fist fight when he stopped them and said, "Look, I know you hate each other, but if you're thinking about fighting, you should at least do it over something worth it. Otherwise, you'll both end up in jail." They stopped and thought about it for a moment. Then suddenly one of them burst out laughing and said, "You're right. Why waste our energy on nothing? Let's go get some more drinks." In the end, the entire village thrived due to his efforts. The fields were filled with crops, the livestock had doubled, and everyone worked together as a team. However, one day everything changed. A group of 30 heavily armed bandits showed up, demanding food and money. If they didn't get it, they threatened to burn the entire village to the ground. Everyone panicked, but the sergeant remained calm. Then, looking at the leader of the pack, he said, Well, you've got yourself quite the reputation, haven't you?" "What?" the bandit leader asked. "I've heard stories about you and your men," he continued. "You're infamous for pillaging and plundering villages, stealing their food and killing anyone who gets in your way." The bandit leader blushed slightly, then shouted, "Why don't you shut up and hand over your valuables? Otherwise, I swear I'll cut your head off." "Oh, my apologies," the sergeant said. "It's just that I'm in charge of protecting the grumpy old countess who lives here. And if you hurt her, I'll personally make sure you die a horrible death." The bandit leader laughed at this and said, "Okay, let's pretend you're brave. What are you gonna do? Attack us?" "No," the sergeant replied. "Instead, I challenge you to a contest of strength. If we win, you'll leave the village peacefully. But if you win, you can take everything you want." Although this seemed like a terrible idea, the bandits readily accepted. First, the sergeant challenged them to an eating contest, but they quickly tapped out after eating themselves silly. Then he challenged them to a drinking contest, but they lost again. Finally, he challenged them to a wrestling match. One by one, they fell until only the leader was left. But to everyone's surprise, he actually managed to pin the sergeant down. However, the moment he raised his sword to strike the killing blow, the sergeant suddenly grabbed his leg and pulled him off balance. Then in a flash, he rolled over and pinned the bandit leader to the ground. Everyone gasped. Then erupted into cheers as the sergeant removed his mask to reveal the face of the notorious bandit leader. It turned out that he had gotten injured a long time ago and had to wear a mask to cover up the scar. As the other bandits watched in disbelief, the sergeant said, "Looks like you're coming with me to see the countess." With that, he tied them up and led them back to the village. From that day forward, the villagers never complained about the sergeant's presence again. In fact, they celebrated him every day as their lucky young village sergeant who brought them their greatest fortune.